Mukund, when I started getting to know you, one of the things I was amazed at is the business plan of Tata and Sons. How it works. I don't know. I've lived in India and I've been away for 25 years and I came back, but somehow I never knew any company that gives away 66% of their profits into a foundation. I've just never met any company. So Tata and Sons that owns over 100 companies and is the holding company gives away 66% of its profits. So tell me a little bit of where did it start? It obviously was done by the founders, and what was the thinking behind it?
Sure. So it really started with the founder, Jamsetji Tata. He established as far back as 1892 the J.N. Tata Endowment, which in those days was really set up to fund the education of young, brilliant Indians. And typically in those days, there weren't many universities or colleges in India. So he would sponsor them to go overseas, typically to Britain, and get an education, come back and contribute to civil society. There was a point of time, I think, through the 1920s, 1930s, where it was said that maybe 1 in 3 to 1 in 4 Indian civil service officers had actually been on the J.N. Tata Endowment Scholarship, received an education, come back to India, written the civil service examinations, and then joined the civil services. The first person to receive an endowment scholarship was Freni Kama. So,
Okay.
the lady after whom the hospital has been named.
Right.
So, for somebody in those days to really think about women's empowerment, women's issues, is again very forward-looking. He started with that. And then towards the end of his life, really the passion of his life became this whole space of education. He met Swami Vivekananda. We heard references to Swami Vivekananda earlier. And that just reinforced his view that if you wanted to do one big thing for India as a nation, it would have to be in the space of education. And so he put in all his efforts to create what eventually became the Indian Institute of Science in Bangalore. He had a famous statement attributed to him that in a free enterprise, the community is not just another stakeholder in business, but is in fact the very purpose of its existence. So he passionately believed that without a successful community, you will not have customers for sure, you won't have investors, you really need to carry people with you. I think that philosophy really was then imbibed by both his sons, Sir Dorab Tata and Sir Ratan Tata. And when they in turn were reaching a point of time when they had to think about the future, both incidentally didn't have children. They both left their wealth to charities, which are today the Sir Dorab Tata Trust and the Sir Ratan Tata Trust, which are probably the wealthiest charities, perhaps this side of the world. Conservatively, they probably control assets worth $40 to $50 billion. So they are very rich charities, and their entire mandate since the time they were created in the 1920s, 1930s has been to really fund good causes in society. So in the Tata Group, when we join the group, we all understand that at the level of the parent investment holding company, Tata Sons, we're principally held by charities. And therefore, the work that you do substantially helps to fund these charities. And therefore, the profits that are generated by the companies really go back to fund good social causes. And that gives you a sense of real pride, of self-actualization to an extent. And that I think is what has really kept this engine running for now close to 150 years.
Yeah. And you joined the Tatas in 1995.
That's right.
Through Tata Administrative Services.
Yep.
Very important year because that's the year I found a man who was courageous enough to marry me. So I will always remember when Mukund started at Tata's. So, you joined through the Tata Administrative Services and you've seen the transition to Mr. Ratan Tata from JRD. In that time period after that, there was a transition. So what was it like being a young person and seeing the transition? Was it very clear that Ratan Tata was going to take over, or was it a surprise, or what was it like in those early days?
So Lakshmi, actually, when I joined, he'd already taken over.
But there was still, so I'm sure there were remnants of JRDs, or no?
Well, there were. In popular media, there's a lot of discussion around the so-called satraps
Yeah.
people who controlled some of the large Tata companies. And Mr. Tata himself has gone on record many times talking about some of the time he had to invest in gently persuading some of these gentlemen as they became older to really step off the board and give him more space to really do
Yeah.
the things he wanted to, make the changes he needed to. He inherited a board which I think had an average age of between 70 and 75 years for an India that was just beginning to wake up to all
Yeah.
the potential that a free market offers. 1991, you had the economic reforms,
Yeah.
and he had just taken over as chairman of the Tatas. 1993, J.R.D. Tata passed away, so his mentor and guide was no longer there. And that period in the mid-90s, 1994, 95, 96, 97, I'd say till around 98, I think a lot of the governance issues in the group were what sort of preoccupied him the most. And that's when also significant changes began to take place. We came together cohesively as a Tata group around that point of time. I remember we invested in a major corporate identity program to try and unify the identity of Tatas. Today on all our visiting cards, you'll see the famous Tata logo.
Yeah.
That didn't exist pre-1998. What we used to have is each company had created its own version of what the Tata logo and emblem stood for and meant. We didn't have a common set of values. We didn't have a code of conduct. The code of conduct was created in 1998. So I think Mr. Tata really worked very hard to bring the group together, to unify the group. And I was very privileged that I joined the Tata Administrative Service in 95. I joined his office in 96. And then the next 12 years I worked with him. And that was a period of tremendous change for India, certainly for Tatas. And that's when you saw many of these developments on corporate governance, on bringing the companies closer together, on investing for the future, on investing on innovation, creating the Tata Business Excellence model, the whole internationalization agenda, the big acquisitions that we made in the 2000s. So period of tremendous change, but also great excitement and fun.
Yeah, and I think Mr. Tata's passion for flying, and there's a history of love toward flying with the Tatas, and you've had the relationship with Singapore Airlines. I mean, it's been for 20 years. It's like one of the most patient deal ever made, I think, is that. So finally you have Vistara as a partnership. I mean, what was it like to have a dream, to want to pursue something for 20 years? I mean, it's not that everybody woke up and all they thought about is that, but it was there always in the background. So what is it for a company to be so clear about, I want to be in it, and have the patience to pursue it? What was going on behind the closed doors?
I think there are lots of learnings for us, and I think some very good lessons generally for corporates from that experience. So first of all, just to step back, why did we want a partnership with Singapore Airlines? Actually, we weren't the ones who initially broached the possibility of a joint venture. It actually came as a result of discussions between the Indian government and the Singapore government in the early 1990s, the Narasimha Rao administration and Lee Kuan Yew. And there was a desire in Singapore particularly to try and build a closer partnership and association with India. And one of the ways to sort of give wings to that partnership that they were very keen on was to get Singapore Airlines to enter the Indian aviation space. And Singapore Airlines said, we aren't going to do it alone, we need an Indian partner. And after some amount of deliberation, they said that Tatas would be the right partner for them. So we were actually contacted by the government. The Principal Secretary to the Prime Minister then, A.N. Verma, made a call to Mr. Tata and said, would you be interested? Now here's a group that pioneered aviation in India. We created what then became Air India. Air India was nationalized after Indian independence, but J.R.D. Tata, who was the founding chairman, continued as chairman of Air India till the mid-70s. So we had a history of participation in that industry, and then it was taken away from us. So when this opportunity came up in the 1990s, Mr. Tata, who also incidentally served as chairman of Air India in the late 80s under Rajiv Gandhi, said, we'll give it a thought. And after some deliberation, he said, why not? The Indian market's opening up. We need the best airline in the world to be created. At one time, Air India did have that reputation.
Yes.
We think we can do it again. And then you saw all the vested interests and the roadblocks step in to stop us, to the extent where in the mid-90s, Parliament actually passed a regulation that said that foreign airlines could not invest in domestic Indian airlines, a rule that made no sense. but that rule was legislated. So we said, fine, we won't bring in Singapore Airlines as an equity partner, but we want them to come in as a technical partner with no equity. And so they sat on a license application for that as well. And this just continued for a period of time. Then a new administration came in that said we're going to privatize Air India. So we said, fine, here's a great chance to get back into the airline we created. Again, we'll bring Singapore Airlines as a technical partner, and we bid for Air India. We actually emerged as the preferred bidder, and then they sat on a file.
Yeah.
So for almost 8 years, one event after the next was really devised to keep Tatas out of aviation. And finally, in the early 2000s, I remember we started writing a letter to the then Prime Minister, Mr. Vajpayee, saying we've been patient, we have waited, this is simply not working out, so we are withdrawing our application. And that was the end of that. In some ways, a little ironical that just a few months after we withdrew our application, you had 911, after which the entire global aviation industry went south. So maybe it was just as well that we didn't enter that point of time. In 2013, when the government revised the legislation and said now it's fine, foreign airlines can take equity stakes in Indian Airlines, Singapore Airlines had the option of contacting any Indian partner. They could have gone to anybody. But who did they come to first? They came back to Tata's. So I think the moral of the story is one, of course, that we are very patient, but we are patient because we want to do the right thing. And we will not be distracted or diverted or cut corners to achieve our objective. Because there were periods of time when we were told, listen, if you do these backroom arrangements with XYZ minister, you'll get your license cleared. We said nothing to it. It has to come the fair way or we won't get in. So we stayed out of the business. But the other moral of the story is our partners, who are, again, very credible, very successful group in their own right, when they had the opportunity, they came back to us. And I think that's the importance of ethics and values, that they hold you in good stead, not just for the short term, but literally for generations. And I think we are very lucky that we've earned that reputation and people respect us for that. And so when they came back to us, we said, fine, we'll give it another go.
Yeah. So now, after the transition of Mr. Ratan Tata to Cyrus Mistry, you are the brand custodian of the Tata brand. So when you look into the future, there is, 65% of India is under the age of 35. I mean, we have these huge numbers. I'm sure they're reflective in, employees of the Tata pool as well. So what does the brand mean for a whole new generation? What are the things you're doing to make the brand mean something evolving, not new, but something evolving?
So, first of all, my own role, this role didn't exist in the past, but Cyrus was very clear that the Tata brand has been built on the pillars of ethics and governance and a reputation for giving back to society. So he said, I want somebody to play this role who will also therefore serve as the chief ethics officer of the group and also oversee all our CSR activity. So I played those dual roles in the capacity of brand custodian. The brand itself, we think for those reasons, really has to be communicated to audiences around the world and in India on the strength of really 3 strong messaging corridors. The first, that now we are a global group. We have Indian origins, but today 70% of our turnover is actually generated outside India. And we need to communicate that well to audiences around the world, that we are a global group today. We have a turnover of over $100 billion. We're one of the largest corporates of the world. Second, that we are trustworthy. Our reputation for ethical conduct, high standards of corporate governance, the investments we make in our business excellence model, trying to put out a good quality product and service for our customers. That story has to be communicated well as well. So we are trustworthy. And the third is we're a good corporate citizen. The fact that we're principally owned by charities at the level of our investment holding company, and that we believe wherever we operate, that we have to become a partner of choice, a neighbor of choice, and really invest in the local community. So those are the 3 messaging corridors. And if you ask me in one sentence, what would I like Tatas to be known as around the world? It would be a successful, pioneering, global enterprise with the community at its heart.
Yeah. And so there's another thing that you do that's very interesting. We keep talking about innovation, and for innovation, failure is a very integral part. And most of the companies punish people who have failures. Tell us about what you do actually with the failures in your company.
So we have a very interesting award, which actually is one of the more sought after awards in what we call the Tata Innovista, which is our annual event where all our group companies come together and make submissions of interesting innovations that are up for prizes. And that award is called Dare to Try. So Dare to Try is an award that's actually given for innovations that didn't actually get executed in the market. And the reasons could be many. They could be the business case wasn't entirely well constructed, or it needed a lot of funding, which the company was not in a position to provide at that point of time. But the idea is a very strong idea, and you want to actually applaud the courage, the competence, and the perseverance of the people who put it together and tried to make it work. And very often these ideas, their time may not have yet come, so it can still work maybe a year, 2 years down the line. So it's really an award for trying, and it's an award that actually tells people who failed that it's fine. It's actually good to fail.
Yeah.
Don't worry, it's gonna come right the next time. And that I think is quite unique. Usually you get awards for success.
Yeah.
This is one award where you put people on a platform, the group chairman, Cyrus, will give the award. You're telling everybody it's okay. Failure is part of the process. And you're going to get a pat on the back, not a kick in the bum for failing. I think that's very, very important if you want to be an innovative organization.
Yeah. So we talked about Tatas, we talked about innovation. Let me ask a little bit about you, okay? So my understanding is that you were actually quite a difficult student when you're a very reluctant scholar. And what I was told is that he went from being a reluctant scholar to a Rhodes Scholar. So how did that happen? Why were you reluctant? Is it the schools were killing all the interest you had, and where did that turn happen for you?
I don't know. I for some reason I just hated school. In some ways, actually, I hate authority. I find it very.
And they all call you boss.
I mean, sort of being in a classroom, tied down without the freedom to. I would love to just be on the playground, scampering around. Summer holidays were the best time of the year. I just look forward to those. I'd never study for exams, and the night before, suddenly I'd wake up to the fact that I don't know anything about the subject. I guess in probably the 11th and 12th standard, I sobered down a little bit. My parents had left India. They went to London. And so they left my middle brother and me were staying alone. And I think that's the point of time when I became a little bit serious about life. Because I knew if I didn't score well in my exams, or as it happens, I went to IIT, so the joint entrance exam, I might not have a very successful future. In those days, I mean, the choices were very limited, right? I mean, we used to talk about engineering or medicine.
Right.
And those are really the sought after two professions. And then you looked at social sciences. But I knew I had to sort of work hard, and I guess from that period on, I sort of straightened out a little bit.
Okay, and I hope that there's some hope for my son. That's good to know. At 12, I tell him just pass every class, man. That's all I want. So, and the other question I keep asking you, Mukund, I'm going to ask is that, here your whole siblings, you look at your family, one's telling, the whole financial world what to do, you're telling whole Tatas what to do, and your brother is, another brother is redefining solar and energy, etc. And your sister is an amazing linguist. What did your parents do? I just want to know. I have a child who wants to play soccer all day and can just, give a flying whatever about any other subject. What did your parents do to get such well-behaved, wonderful? I don't know what you were in your past life, but whenever I've seen you, very well-behaved. So, what did your parents do?
Well, you'll probably have to ask them that question. But
I was trying. I really wanted to get him to bring his mom. He refuses to let me meet his mother. I think he knows I'll get a lot of stories out of her. So
no, but what I can say is, I think my father was a little bit more of the disciplinarian, but he was very focused on his work, his job, and he set an example of being very committed to. He was a civil servant.
Right.
So very committed to the responsibility you carry. So we had one role model there. And then my mother was, a voracious reader and a terrific sportswoman. She made us learn swimming, she made us learn tennis, all the racket sports, and she had absolutely no problem with the way I was growing up. I mean, she used to say that there's no problem, you fail all your exams, there's a buffalo out there, you can graze it every day. That can be your...
She sounds like me.
So don't worry about it at all. So I think that combination
Yeah.
of two role models, but each very different in their own way, but encouraging us to just explore our inner instincts and passions.
Yeah.
I think that was very, very important. And then amongst the siblings,
Yeah.
I guess there was an element of sibling rivalry.
Yeah.
So
Competition,
each of
like
us,
who's going to do better?
Exactly. So my eldest brother is the one who stayed true to engineering, the one who's in solar.
Yeah.
All of us went to IIT.
Yeah.
But because he went to IIT, I think the next one studied hard and wanted to get in. And then because he went in, then it was a challenge for me. I had to do better or at least get in, right?
Yeah.
So I think it worked quite well. I think we all turned out.
Do you get along now, or do you fight with each other even now?
No, we used to squabble a hell of a lot when we were growing up, but no, we're good now.
One
We're
happy
the best of
family.
friends.
All right. So my last question to you, Mukund, is that we've talked about Tata's as a company, you as a person, and now you as a person in the new economy. You wrote recently an article in Economic Times about the Paris conference and. The position India has taken, the position that the conference has taken about, what we all need to do collectively to keep the, global warming at a certain level, etc. And one of the argument that's always made is that, hey, we are developing now, so we should be allowed to, do whatever we want, just as America did or so. That argument gets us all nowhere. So share with us a little bit about what are your views on what is the opportunity India has actually to be a leader in controlling global warming as well as developing at the same time.
So I think some of the statements that the government has made about our determination to meet our intended nationally determined contribution by 2030 are taking us in the right direction. So the focus on alternative energy sources beyond fossil fuels, the focus on renewable energy, I think these are going to be critical. If India meets its target of 100 gigawatts of solar power in the next 5 odd years, I think that will be dramatic. And a lot of the changes you're seeing in the solar industry as a result of this kind of focus are, I think, going to change quite a lot the dynamics of the way industry itself procures power and the way we use energy to fund our growth. The point you made about, we can go to town saying we've not had the benefit of development and growth, and the developed countries are the ones that preceded us in really consuming the carbon budget, and therefore why should we do anything about it? And yet we are possibly going to be amongst the worst victims of global warming and the consequences of global warming. You already in this city have seen the impact of unprecedented floods that took place last year. So I think beyond a point, you shouldn't push that argument too far, because if the world does nothing, you will be amongst the largest sufferers. So we have to take the lead and do something about it. But solar is a good example of ways in which, if we cleverly deploy our talent, our capability, and press the developed world for transfer of technology and support, you can leapfrog generations. We've seen what happened in mobile telecommunications. We completely circumvented the landline growth, right? So today in India, we still have maybe 30 to 40 million landlines, which is what it was like half a decade back. But now you have 1 billion mobile customers. So you can leapfrog with the benefit of new technology. And I think that's the opportunity for Indian entrepreneurs and for the Indian government. And we need to play our cards well in international negotiations to make sure we get the support and the transfer of technology in these kinds of spaces, so that we don't necessarily need to repeat the mistakes of the West in our path to growth.
So in all your life so far, as a student, as a working person, professional, etc., do you have role models? Apart from, you work for the Tatas, so, half the India named Mr. Ratan Tata as a role model, so you don't get to do that. So apart from people at Tata's, I mean, is there somebody who's inspired you, who you thought was like, pretty cool person?
Yeah, the father of our nation, Mahatma Gandhi. And I think several things about him that truly impressed me. One, his transparency and candor. Despite the amazing position that he held and the kind of influence he wielded in Indian society and with people who eventually went on to form the first Indian government after independence. But the man was quite willing to be completely open and transparent in his thoughts on issues, in the way he conducted himself, in his beliefs. And that I find awesome. I mean, quite inspiring. The other thing that his life story holds as a lesson is the fact that he was killed by another Indian. So it just proves that you will never convert the entire world to your point of view. You will always have opposition.
Yeah.
But you need to have the courage of conviction. Just go out there and stand for yourself. So I think what he stood for and the way he conducted himself, that's amazing. I think he's a tremendous role model for all of us. Should be proud that he led our independence movement.
Yeah. Thank you. So the time's up for our conversation. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much.
Thank you. Thank you.